want to hire the best talent no matter where they are. We really focused on trying to build a remote first company out of the gate. So it was like we were remote before it was cool. So we kind of built systems from the ground up to do that.
Instead of measuring people by their input, their hours worked, if they're a developer, the number of lines of code they're producing, that kind of stuff, we want to make sure that we're measuring people by their output. We want to have really high expectations, but it's really focused on like, hey, I'm gonna set these really high expectations. I'm gonna make sure you really clearly understand the problem that I need you to solve. But I also want you to have insight on the value that solving that problem has to the company, to the business, to me. I need to make sure that you can solve these problems and I can expect a lot from you. And the return of that, what you get from from being able to demonstrate that you can do that well, is that high trust that we want to create.
Welcome to the Differential podcast, where we talk to industry leaders building tech. My name is Shabano, and I'm joined by my co-host, Tyler.
Hello.
And today we have some very special guests, David Woody, the CEO of Differential, and Conrad VanLandingham, our CTO. So these are two very impressive individuals. Together with the other leadership at Differential, they've built out several business lines, a SaaS product that's growing and doing millions in ARR, a service side of the company that works with clients like Procter & Gamble, Humana, and venture-backed startups. So very excited to have a conversation with you guys today. Let's start it off with easy for the listeners. Tell us what Differential does.
Yeah, so we started off originally as a venture studio, and we kind of built from there, transitioned a few years into that into really like an agency model, did services-based stuff with different companies, and fast forward 10 years, we're back to kind of the venture studio model where we have both kind of a studio side of the business and then a venture side of the business. So we get excited about building great digital products with companies.
Cool. So I feel like DI has a very unique history. I think every company kind of does, every successful company, but how and why did you decide to get involved with DI? And I know just give us the background. It started where you weren't necessarily one of the founders, but you sort of were because the company was handed off to you. So tell us what you were doing.
Yeah. So it really all started back in 2013 when we got together, and we ended up meeting because I had previously kind of quit my job at PricewaterhouseCoopers. That's where I started to start my own company, and went into that, but really worked out of the Crossroads atrium day to day, free coffee, free Wi-Fi. It was a great setup for early startup, and that's where I met kind of at the same time other founders, other entrepreneurs were really there trying to get started with their business and everything. And so that's where I met Tim Mentzner, and he was kind of had an early concept, an early idea of a venture studio model, which ended up growing into becoming Differential, and so was involved kind of in the early days of that, and then ended up joining to really go after the agency side of things and to really grow Differential into what it is today. So.
Cool. So you had already been you've been building your own product. You had left PwC. Why? Because that sounds like a great job, great company.
Yeah. I think I always, growing up, I always knew I wanted to run my own business. So I went into study business in college. So I did finance, accounting, economics, was really into that whole side of things. And then growing up, I was really interested in computers and software and everything, but that was always more, I felt like a hobby, and I'd never really thought about it as a career until I actually got the chance to say, hey, no, I have an idea for a product, and I want to go after and try to build that. And so that was sort of the motivation to compel me to just say, all right, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go figure out how to build this thing. And that's kind of what led me into that. And then kind of the rest is history, I guess. So,
what were you building in the atrium of Crossroads?
So it was called, forever ago, it was called Request Share. And it was kind of like an early Dropbox, how you could make requests for different sort of documents, and those documents could be delivered sort of digitally. So it was kind of a system for getting documents and organizing them from various different sources. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Cool. I feel like the four of us, especially you guys, we all have in common entrepreneurial mindset, which is one of DI's culture values.
Yeah.
Which also translates to, I don't want to work for anyone, but that works at DI for some reason. And Conrad, I feel like maybe that was partly your background too. So I know you did some stuff with film. So tell us a little bit about how you ended up here.
Yeah, I mean, I studied film and radio and television in college. Really worked on the creative side. Grew up with the camera in my hands. That lended itself to a lot of other creative professions and industries. So I worked a lot in web design, graphic design. Again, worked on film sets and TV sets. Did like concert production and stuff like that. What I learned across all these different mediums is the creative process is surprisingly similar. Like when we're building digital products today, like apps, we're thinking about our users in much the same way. In film, you think about the audience. Like I studied classic Hitchcock films, and you talk about horror, and how do you get an audience member to react to something on the screen? Well, it's an exchange of information. You think something's about to happen, and you don't think the character knows that it's about to happen, and you can sit there and literally scream at the screen, saying, "Don't open this door! Don't knock up against this counter because there's this bad guy on the screen, in the other room." And in app development and digital product development, you're thinking about users in the much same way. It's all empathy, and how can we build up enough empathy to understand this person in their moment, and make sure that they understand what they can do, what we want them to do, and how do we guide them in that journey. And then I met cool people like David that I enjoyed working with a lot more than some of the people I was working with in the film industry, and I think the rest is history.
So David, that's how you end up. I feel like when we joined DI, it all happened so fast. It was like Tyler had a conversation with you maybe, and then the next day you were in Dallas.
I was going to be in Dallas.
And we
then
were
all
like
four
at
of
a
us
bar,
met.
and then we worked at DI.
Yeah, four of us met at,
Yeah.
where were we? Happiest hour, I guess.
Happiest
is where we
hour.
met
Yeah,
at.
you just send them the big
hour for
guns,
happy hour.
hire people.
Happiest happy hour ever.
Right.
At happiest happy hour.
Oh yeah. Okay, speaking of hiring talent, so for a small company based out of Cincinnati, how do you manage to hire top talent? And I feel like I've met some of the smartest people in my career at DI. So how do you manage to do that?
Yeah, so I think it was a real differentiator early on in the company, because we started off kind of with the idea of like, we want to hire the best talent no matter where they are. And so we really focused on trying to build a remote first company out of the gate. So it was like we were remote before it was cool, and before COVID happened and all that stuff. So we kind of built systems from the ground up to do that, and kind of included that sort of mindset. So we got a lot of inspiration from like Basecamp and 37 Signals on how to kind of structure a company for remote work. And we still to this day use Basecamp as a project management software for keeping everything sort of asynchronous but collaborative at the same time. And so yeah, I think that's the main thing, is trying to find great people to work with, and then also I think a big thing that's helpful is early on. This was also like really pioneered at the very beginning. I remember Tim Metzner at the very beginning. We kind of worked through this handbook, and that was really founded or grounded in all of our core values. It's been evolved obviously over 10 years, but those core values have remained the same throughout the whole life of the company. And those core values kind of like speak through to, I think, applicants who find Differential maybe there's a job posting or something like that, but then when they actually read the handbook, that's what sort of draws them to the company. And so when we find people who have commonalities in entrepreneurial mindset and in these different areas, and they realize like, oh, this is a remote first company, that's what I'm interested in, that's what I want to join a company like that. That's where I think we have been successful in attracting great talent.
That's awesome. I feel like after you've worked remotely and you've experienced the flexibility and done good work, it's really hard to want to go back to an office. I know people have different opinions on this, but it's so wild to me. So Amazon is leading the charge on bringing people back. I think a couple weeks ago, they decided everyone's back full-time, 9 to 5, 5 days a week. Mm-hmm. I would just be like, nope, I'm leaving. Bye. Yeah. No more working at Amazon. So I guess that leads to the next question, which is, when everyone's working remotely, how do you ensure that people are getting work done, that your teams are getting work done?
Yeah, I mean, I think it obviously starts with the hiring process. You have to hire great people. And so with that's kind of like first layer of criteria. But we also have like a really good 30, 60, 90 sort of process. When we do hire folks, we have kind of those checkpoints early on to sort of validate, hey, are they in line with our core values? Are they, a great team member? Are they embodying, what it means to be a great team member? But then we also have ways to try to make sure that systems and processes and ways to try to make sure, hey, we are going to get the work done that we're promising to get done. And so we work in different systems, and we've kind of developed things over time. But something that was more recent in the last number of years, Basecamp 37 Signals came out with this book called Shape Up, and it really helped us sort of codify and organize more around how do we do digital products? How do we build these things? And how do we actually go after that in a more systematic process that results in the best possible product being built? So early on in Differential, we kind of started with the classic agile mindset of like 2-week sprints, and but that sort of led to some problems of feeling like you're constantly on the hamster wheel. You could never fully complete a feature that's like a big feature in 2 weeks. You had to figure out how to hodgepodge a few number of sprints back to back. And so it just never felt like you could dig into a product and really build out a full, well-rounded feature. You're always making these, half-baked parts in 2-week sprints. And it's really 2-week sprints are better designed for just those incremental improvements versus more radical changes with software and with products that you're trying to go after. And so we really designed, we took that Shape Up model, kind of customized it to the Differential way of doing products. And that sort of has more of a 6-week cycle is what it's called. And we go after that 6 weeks, we're building features, and then we have 2 weeks where we focus on those fixes and improvements and fine tuning and polishing, and having those two things where you're really pushing to build out a great feature and then also followed immediately by those fixes and improvements allows for that extra polish to be put on those products, which help it be the best product it can be. So,
yeah. And I think philosophically, to go back to your question, we have to measure, instead of measuring people by their input, their hours worked, if they're a developer, the number of lines of code they're producing, that kind of stuff. We want to make sure that we're measuring people by their output and really understanding what are the problems that we need you to solve. And of course, we have a lot of processes to figure out how do we make sure that we can get there. But we have to build, especially as a remote first company, we have to build a high trust environment. We can't have a remote workforce and not have high trust. And so we have to design around this idea that we know that people, we can't, despite, how hard some companies might try, we at the end of the day, we don't want to build a culture where we're enforcing, people to be at their desk, at their computer, these hours of the day. And that's how we measure there. No, we're going to measure people by, the problems that we're solving and the output that they're in their contributions to, the projects that we're working on, and get really clear on the problems that we need them to solve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Awesome. Very cool. I like what you said about problems versus work, because I think that's something we end up communicating to clients too. People coming to us to build out products, they think, oh, the amount of time spent on something is what determines the quality. And you hear this a lot. People are like, do you want it done well or do you want it done quickly? You can only have one. And that's kind of BS, because really the quality of a product is determined by how well you understand the problem, really understand it, how well you've thought through the solution. And then the cadence for building it out can be individual to that case, but really it's the problem solution that determines the quality, how smart you are in that aspect.
Yeah. Plus, the client has an abstract notion of what they think the solution should be in the first place.
Right. People come in with solutions. And
they can see a clear linear path. Okay, that's the solution. You guys can easily just do the hours work to be able to accomplish that. We always have to be like, well, that's not actually the best solution.
The best question you can ask is just why over and over again to really drill in.
Whys.
Yeah, the 5 whys, to drill into the root problem. In any sort of consulting world, you just got to ask really good questions and help people understand the real problem behind either the solutions they're coming to you with or the ideas that they think they need.
Right.
And that's where we can interject the most value. It's once we can understand that well, the tech, the software, the development, the coding, that's kind of the easy part.
Right.
Right. So I'm sure you guys saw this a month ago or a few weeks ago. There was this article Paul Graham, the Silicon Valley investor, an entrepreneur, wrote called Founder Mode. I'm sure you guys have heard of Founder Mode, which his idea is the conventional wisdom says that when your company is going from zero to product market fit, the CEO running the company should be in founder mode, as in they have their hands in everything. If you're launching a sales arm, then you are figuring out sales first, then you're hiring people. And then once your company gets bigger and you're focused on sales, you switch to manager mode, which is more like hire great people and let them do their thing. And Paul Graham was saying, actually, you should always be in founder mode, or it's like case by case. And so I feel like you guys do that really well at DI, where sometimes you're in founder mode, sometimes you're in manager mode. But I do think, David, you're in like a special souped up version of founder mode, because I'm like, where is David this week? Like, is he in California? So I love that you literally fly to places where there are teams of people working at DI and you work with them or you get on the same page with them. And I feel like that's ultimate founder mode. So why do you choose to do that? Why are you always on the road?
Well, I think that's actually a part of the secret sauce of how to make remote work really well. Is it doesn't mean that you never see each other. Sometimes the in-person collaboration can still be very potent and valuable in these little short bursts of collaboration when you're really trying to wrangle a problem down. That can always be helpful. Sometimes we'll even do things like different types of experiences, design sprints, strategy sprints, these different sort of experiences, and those can be helpful. Done in just 1 or 2 days of in-person collaboration can really move the needle. And I think there's some serendipity in collaborating and just in a creative environment and just having kind of more time with people that are in that creative space and in that creative mode. You can kind of come up with new and unique ideas that you would have never thought of if it was just you at your desk kind of drawing yourself or something. So I think that's a part of it. So I think and also I just enjoy traveling and collaborating with people in person. So I think that's a part of it, and it helps. I think for me, the reason why I do it is also helps people stay more connected with the company and with the products that we're trying to build and that sort of stuff. And I always feel like it moves the needle when I can go spend some in-person time with folks. So that's why I do it.
Yeah, as a company, like, we get together for 1 week out of the year and purposely waste time together. And, we have to, in some way you can think about it as like, oh, we have to make up for a whole year's worth of being apart as a remote company and invest more into these in-person experiences. But in reality, it's like, no, we kind of get, like, we don't get the daily drama of, an in-person office and the toll that puts on it. All of our moments together are special because they don't happen as much. And you look forward to those moments, you're more fond of them. And so it's like, it is this really interesting balance. Sometimes, I wish I could be, collaborating with somebody I'm trying to collaborate with through a Zoom screen on a given day. But also I really look forward to the moments that we have in person. And I think we do get a lot done because of that.
Yep. Yeah.
That's great. Great point. So I think that really helps keep people motivation-wise and vision-wise on the same place when you're out here. And I wonder, what are the day-to-day things that we do as a company to keep people on the same page? Because I feel like there's a lot that kind of happens in the background.
Yeah, so I think we do a number of different things to try to help keep the teams glued together. The first thing is like, the way we organize teams, I think, is really helpful because we try to provide like, hey, here's the product team that's cross-functional, has everything that it needs to build this product, and everybody's kind of collaborating. So there's these independent kind of teams that can all work, but with a common process. And so a lot of that's daily, what did you work on today's, just check-ins, like here's what I'm working on. That's a place where people can call out, they have challenges or problems or blockers or things like that. Like, hey, here's this issue I'm facing. I was working on this and I'm trying to solve that. That sort of allows for that cross-team pollination where someone might see that and say, oh, hey, actually I ran into that same issue with the React Native upgrade or whatever. Here's how to solve it, whatever the technical issue is. And then also even with the design of stuff, it's always great to have other eyes and critiques from a design perspective and have that cross-team collaboration. So it's a lot of just some of those simple processes, but also like even on a cycle cadence, kind of cycle to cycle, we try to encourage like actually demoing the products and actually showing them off and saying, hey, here, walk through it. And this is something that we're even doubling down on, like that. We've seen a lot of value in demoing the actual products, and we're sort of like, hey, how do we just do more real demos and real time things? So that's something I'm excited to explore even more. I know like this was a common thing, even like at Apple. Steve Jobs would like demo everything. It's like, no, bring it to me. Let me touch it. Let me talk me through it. And then like, let me experience it. And I think the closer you can get to products, the more you can get into the nuance of them and really refine the design of it and figure out like, hey, what's the look, not just like what's the look of it, but what's also the feel of it and how does it function, how does it work, and really kind of digging into that. So we've tried to really just encourage those kind of like independent product teams to really collaborate well with each other. And so we have, we have Slack, we use that all the time, and people are constantly kind of back and forth and jumping in and out of huddles and things like that. So, but we try to also use tools like even like Loom. Loom's a new tool that we're definitely using more and more as a company, where you can just record your screen, talk through something in a more natural way, but then the other person receiving it can kind of consume that and reply to it sort of on their cadence, so they don't have to be jarred, from it. So that's been a really a big unlock for us, is really doubling down on Loom and these asynchronous collaboration tools. So,
cool.
Yeah.
Conrad, so I've heard multiple people say Conrad's the best boss I've ever had. So what are you doing as a manager? What are you doing that these people are so happy with?
Why are you the best boss?
Yeah, why are you the best boss ever? And
Where's
Tyler and I
your
can
mug?
attest. We
Where's
used to
your best
report to
boss
Conrad.
mug? Yeah.
It really goes back to trying to create a high trust environment. Like we want to have really high expectations.
Yep.
But it's really focused on like, hey, I'm gonna set these really high expectations. I'm gonna make sure you really clearly understand the problem that I need you to solve. But I also want you to have insight on the value that solving that problem has to the company, to the business, to me. And so that's definitely a part of it. Because again, we're remote. We have to have high trust. And in order to have high trust, I need to make sure that you can solve these problems, and I can expect a lot from you. And the return of that, what you get from from being able to demonstrate that you can do that well, is that high trust that we want to create. So I think that's definitely a big part of it. And then
I feel like a lot of what you did, and Tyler, like chime in on this, but a lot of what you did was removing obstacles. So people come in with their expectation of what they should do, and sometimes it's a little too much, it's beyond their scope. And so you're really good at course correcting and then helping people delegate and kind of removing problems so that we can just focus on that one task. And I feel like that's a key manager skill.
Yeah, I think at Differential, we're fanatical about one of our core values, that's less but better. And so we're really always trying to carve away like every non-essential element of anything that we're doing. And those are all those unessential elements are obstacles. So if we can carve those all down, we're getting to the real thing that we have to solve. And in tech, like, we take some sayings for granted. Like, you don't know anything until you've launched your first product, or you launched your V1, or if you waited until you were happy with the app or product that you're about to launch, then you waited too long to launch it.
Totally.
So it's like, no, we have to carve away everything that's non-essential, solve the root problem, and get that solution out there as quickly as we can, so that we can go then learn, well, what do we not know? I mean, that's all this is a continuous iteration of learning what we don't know, so we can make it better and better and better.
And some of that too comes from like even trying to start with why. People think about like, oh yeah, start with why of the company, like big picture, big level. But also we drilled that down into the actual products that we build. So even like in our pitch templates that all of our product teams do to define the work kind of cycle to cycle that we're betting on, we have a section kind of dedicated at the top of around motivation. Like, why do we want to build this feature? Why is this important? And it's not just problem solution. It's like, here's the why, here's the motivation for why this feature is important, or why this part of the product is important. And then here's problem, appetite, solution, all the no-goes and all that stuff in the pitch itself. But I think it comes back to that, starting with the motivation, starting with why, because if the team can understand that, then we can make better progress faster.
Very cool. Very cool. Shifting gears a little bit, I feel like a lot of people at DI are very creative. So this concept of why a thing, that's very design thinking to me. And I feel like people are very design oriented and creative in their personal lives. Like Tyler's a painter, Conrad does film and all kinds of other stuff. You are an incredible singer and guitarist. Surprisingly, I don't have any creative talent. I'm the only one
That's
out.
not true.
But I love it. Did that just happen synchronistically, or do you like hire people? You're like, oh, you play a musical instrument, you're in.
It is kind of funny. That was definitely not the intention, but I think we all started to kind of like see that as a common thing. Like something about our handbook or job postings or something kind of attracts those creative types to the company. And so that was a pattern that we just noticed from very early on, and I think it still rings true for sure. Yeah.
I think it's as a company we attract autonomous builders who like to be collaborative, which is not like a normal worker in like a cog machine type scenario. And everything that you guys do managerially allows that to flower. And I think that's why we have so many creatives that get to do their own thing autonomously, but they also like to collaborate with people in like a band.
Yeah.
I feel like karaoke should just be added into the interview process.
Just always, what's your karaoke song?
Right.
All right, perform it now.
Perform it now.
I would not work at this company if that was the case. I would not pass
Conrad's
that test.
out.
I would not pass
Conrad's
that test.
out. Okay, so DI builds primarily SaaS products. Have you encountered any kind of competition in the spaces that you're in?
Oh, goodness.
Any stories?
Let me think. Yeah, so this is more recent. This is like kind of, I feel like we've experienced a little bit. We've been hiring for a few roles recently, and fortunately we have a really sharp person who leads HR. But we realize we're starting to be subjected to some corporate espionage, if you will, where I think companies are trying to look at what products we're building, and even they're sending some of their employees to interview for positions at the company to try to get more insider information on where are we going, where are we taking products, what's happening behind the scenes. So fortunately, we have really sharp, HR folks that can sniff that out, and we say, that's not what we're going to share right now. But
that's so wild. I can't imagine thinking, oh, that's the strategy. Let's interview.
Yeah.
Although I have looked at competitor job descriptions because I'm like, you can see what their stack is, like how they're building that, but not like go to them and pretend. What if you got an offer and it was great and you like it and now you just work there? That's wild.
Become a double agent.
You're a spy forever.
Yeah,
in that
spy
case.
forever.
Yeah, what you got a great offer, you like their culture, maybe just switch.
Yeah.
Just switch over.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the biggest challenge of running a company that has a service arm? So specifically on the studio side, what's the toughest part of that?
Yeah, I feel like we've been really fortunate with our like studio side of the business, with the agency side. I think some of the classic problems of agency is you just have all of these different projects happening all the time and they're constant movement. But we've been fortunate to kind of go deep with companies and build longer term relationships with companies. So our company, our longest running customer is 10 years running still. We're still iterating and building. We've built multiple versions, multiple different pieces of software in partnership with them. So I think that's been really great to minimize the problem. But still, the classic problem of agency is like capacity planning and trying to figure out, okay, we're trying to go after these big things, these big features. How do we get the right team? How do we get the right team on it as product needs kind of evolve over time? So we had early days, the classic agency model is just hours. It's just hours, you bill hours and that's it. But we kind of had a different take on that. So we tried to say, hey, we came up with a term, we called it the DTU, which just is differential team unit. And it's just a representation. You can think of it kind of as an FTE, but it's not a specific person. It's just, hey, this is this representation of the differential team, as a team unit. And so, hey, if you have a small team, it might be 3 DTUs. But the early in that product's life cycle, it might need a lot more design resource to figure out what are we actually doing? How does this come together? How does it work? And then you need to start to pull in, different development resources. Or if you're doing this big back-end integration with a very specialized technology, okay, we need to go find a very specific skill set to slot into that. But so we've tried to keep it, we've tried to keep the way we even price and quote things very flexible to put the product at the center. What does the product need and how do we deliver that really well? And that also kind of keeps us off of the constant hamster wheel of just build more hours. Like the way we do it is like, actually, a DTU is a DTU. So it doesn't matter if you work a zillion hours in one or if you just hit the mark, like the bill rate's the same, on a monthly basis. So we kind of took that intentionality so that we wouldn't have adverse incentives to just overwork. That's what I came from. I came from PwC, where it's like, work 100 hours a week. We're going to fly you everywhere, and we're just going to burn you into the ground,
Right.
And so it's like, hey, let's not do that, because that's not a way to foster the creative environment and the creative,
Yep.
what you actually need to build a great product. So
Yeah, cool. So the agency side, the studio side, is an interesting part of the business, because I think traditional dev shops agencies would struggle to compete with offshore dev. If you're just taking a design, building out a product, that is a really difficult business to be in. I feel like DI is kind of in a unique case where instead of building out a product, it's these bigger companies that want someone to partner with, maybe commercialize a product. And so the agency side becomes this incubator for all these ideas. And then once one of these ideas has some traction, you move it to the product side, where now it's a SaaS product, it's being commercialized, there's more resources being applied. And so I think that's kind of a brilliant way to do a venture studio, because venture studios struggle with, one, let's raise a bunch of money and then make a bunch of companies, which if you're trying to sell that to an LP or to a family office to raise money, they're like, oh, so you think you're going to build $10 billion businesses versus me investing over here in these guys who think they're going to make one? So it's a hard sell, but it's kind of, so this model is like a self-funded venture studio where you're minimizing the risk for anyone involved, and you're kind of churning through these ideas. Mm-hmm. And when one gets a little traction, then you double down, which I think is great. So the question I have about that is, how do you know when to double down on a product to then move it from the studio side into its own venture?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the companies that I do think we've heard from a number of customers that have come to us, even some that said, hey, I went to this agency and they built exactly what I asked them to build. Exactly what I asked them. And it was the wrong thing. It ended up being the wrong thing to build. And so I think it's something where that's where we would try to come at these problems from a first principles, more of no, we're going to challenge you a bit. We're going to ask the 5 whys questions. We're going to dig in a little bit more. And I think the companies that we've been partnered with for the longest time are really looking to, revolutionize their business or change their business model or do different things. And so in that journey, I think it can be difficult to figure out when and how do you kind of go from kind of the MVP early idea incubation phase to then fast forward to, okay, this thing's ready to scale. And I think it's the classic startup language of finding that product market fit, but it's getting to that place where, oh, this is solving real problems and creating real value, and the users and customers of the product are, wanting more and more of that. And so once you kind of find that sort of place, it's almost like a feel. You kind of feel that happening, where you start to get some word of mouth. Other customers start to bring you more customers. They're like, hey, I told so-and-so and they want something, and that's honestly how Differential grew over time, was really through that word of mouth of just other folks, telling their friends about, hey, I worked with this company called Differential and they helped us build this product. And this is why we've been successful in kind of scaling our business. So, yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's very helpful. Conrad, how did you know when Apollos had product market fit? What were the feelings and events?
So Apollos is a product that serves the church and nonprofit space. And if you think about the church space, it's a very self-referencing industry. We're selling to churches. One church is not in competition with another church. And so the way we really found product market fit is through those conversations and connections that our clients, our customers, our partners would help us make. Hey, can we talk to so and so, or who do you think would fit, would find value out of this product? And so Apollo started off. We worked with one church that was originally a customer of ours on the studio side. They helped us create kind of the next iteration of that, which was working with 3 to 4 churches, kind of pooling resources together to try to build, going from this MVP to a V1. And then we just started working with more and more customers from there. And, we found product market fit because we're solving problems in a way that really no one else is in this space. I mean, churches are kind of in a do or die stage right now in the industry, like losing 32% of their attendees year over year. And we're offering really innovative solutions that can really add a lot of value to people's lives.
I feel like one of the apps you built, maybe this was like a custom thing, but one of the apps you built had an insane retention rate, right? Like there was, I think over time, social media apps have leveled out to under 40% for like daily active users retention. And one of your cohorts was like 60% or something after that same period of time, which is wild. How did that happen?
Yeah, I mean, so with cohorts are interesting. So let me explain a little bit what that is. So we're taking people through like 21-day journeys to improve some aspect of their life. It could be focused on parenting, and especially in this post-COVID world, people are increasingly disconnected, but they still desire those connections. And if you look at like social media, a lot of like these experiences that you can get in social media are very, look at me, they're very flat in a way. And what we found with these cohorts is you get a bunch of parents together and they don't realize how much they're all living in the same problems, dealing with the same things, because they don't necessarily see that on a day-to-day basis in social media. And so we're taking these people through these 21-day journeys, and it's the retention has been fascinating. So we were experiencing things like really, really strong retention, but going back to like what value are we creating for our customers? Churches, they haven't done stuff like this before. Like asking a church that's used to doing everything in person, that their measure is butts and seats in person, and asking them to do something digitally where they can't even really see the people that are engaging, that's a tall ask. But what we're seeing from these cohorts is not only are they signing up for it in high volumes and engaging and having some pretty strong retention rates, we're seeing them take next steps at these organizations after the cohort in pretty high percentages as well. So whether that's going in person or joining a group or giving or serving or some way giving back to this organization in ways that they traditionally measure as success. So churches are seeing that, and that's why that's going back to the product market fit thing again. That's a really strong indicator of we're doing some things that are working.
Cool. Okay, great. So David, this question's for you. What's one thing you wish you knew before you went all in on DI? If you could go back to 10 years ago.
I think I definitely there's a lot that I didn't know at the time, and I think you almost have to have that blind bravery to kind of be an entrepreneur. You have to just be very confident, I think, to go after it, because there are many, many challenges along the way, and so there's a part of me that's like, oh, I wish I would have known all of these things, but it's like, hey, maybe that would have been discouraging,
right?
Maybe that's
wouldn't have done it.
Maybe I would have second guessed it at the time, So I'm glad I didn't. But I do think that's the biggest thing, is that to be an entrepreneur, you have to kind of go and venture out. You have to be willing to go on an adventure with uncertainty and just a lot of risk, and kind of figure out how to navigate that world from and just figure out, okay, how do we get to where we want to go, and how do we keep charting the path to kind of the North Star. And that's one of the things that I felt like was a helpful thing. And this actually iterated and evolved our handbook over time. Basically, all of the employee benefits that we have came from essentially this one question that we would ask every single year at our all company gatherings, which was, what would make this the last company you would ever want to work for? And so asking that question just constantly, and even answering that for myself, and trying to figure out like, okay, I want to be at a place that is constantly challenging me, where I'm constantly trying to learn new things, where there's a lot to just grab onto. That's the type of thing, the constant improvement. So like, that's one of the little like sayings we have, is like, continuous improvement's our superpower. So how do we constantly get better, just continuously improve in all of the different aspects? And so I think that's really the motivation kind of behind it, but of why to go after that stuff. But it takes a lot of bravery, takes a lot of willingness to go on a uncertain adventure. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. Do you feel like you just got pulled into it and that was just destiny?
always wanted to do it. So it was like a dream that I had for a long time.
But you were in Battle of the Bands. You could have just been a rock star.
I could have been a rock star.
The other path.
A different path, a different path, a different life.
In another life.
In another life, yeah.
Tyler, you want anything you want to ask?
Well, what you just said was interesting. It made me think you can never be an entrepreneur twice. You always just are that. Like, because you asked, what would you want to know differently? But you never get to be an entrepreneur again. You're just an entrepreneur and that's it. Like, you don't get to know what you're not going to know. That's the whole point
Or
of being
saying you don't get to make all the early mistakes again, which are so fun. Yeah.
Well, which leads you to your success or failure or whatever. And all of our clients, studio side, and I probably dealing with churches too, they are the opposite of entrepreneurs. They work for companies where they're protected, so they don't have to take risks. And so basically our idea that we bring to our clients is we are injecting an entrepreneurship into their business models because we have to. They're like stuck, basically.
One of the investors in my first company, this brilliant guy, he was on a podcast and he was explaining how he thinks of ideas. So he's sold 2 companies, and I don't think those are all the companies in him. He's like, true entrepreneur, that's the only thing he can do. And he was saying his first idea just came to him. His second idea, he was on vacation, it just came to him. So he's just waiting around for the third idea to just come to him. So is that what you're saying? You're saying, like, as an entrepreneur, you don't choose to be an entrepreneur. That's just
what
you don't
happens.
chooses you.
Right.
But also like normal companies, they have the opposite mentality. And like, if they need a product because they're stuck, they know they have some kind of idea. We need to have something built, but they could never get there because they're the opposite end of the spectrum on entrepreneurship and non-entrepreneurship. Like, they'll never be able to gain the skills that we have to inject into their company to be able to build what they need to be built.
Oh, that makes sense. So there's this great quote, I feel like that sums this up, which is intelligence hits a target that other people are missing, but genius hits a target that other people can't even see. So we're like here trying to show them this is the target.
Which I think is so hard whenever you deal with clients, and you guys have many, years experience dealing with this. Like, again, they have an idea in their brain, and it is probably not the correct idea.
And it's really like we've worked with clients. We call them like what we call them, not entrepreneurships, but like intrapreneurs. They're inside these companies, and they really do have an entrepreneurial like mindset or bent. But companies oftentimes became big and successful because they've processed everything out to a T.
Yeah.
And you need the creativity, so you kind of need some unbounded space to work to create a new thing. And a lot of times these companies don't have those provided spaces. And so a lot of times we're partnering with these folks who are like a classical entrepreneur trying to be an entrepreneur in the context of a bigger corporate space, which is very challenging for them. And so we try to help them figure out like, hey, we can come alongside you and really partner with you to figure out like, how do we do that? How do we help the broader company kind of see the light, and there's oftentimes a lot of really high entrepreneurial folks that are at these companies trying to make change. But until they can get, it's really hard unless they're a designer themselves and they can really visualize and show and roadmap and communicate. That's one of the things that we do really well. I mean, you guys do this, is like, you guys help crystallize down, here's your actual vision into a highly polished pitch deck that you can go to your board, or you can go to the CEO, you can go to whoever and help get this thing funded, help get this vision communicated out to folks. And so I think that's the biggest place where we can help, is not only just like getting the actual product in, like bringing the product to life, but also helping the project and vision kind of be communicated to two different folks inside of the company, and how to actually help them unlock the potential that's there.
Right. So we're really selling the entrepreneurial mindset at DI. That's what we're selling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. Conrad, if you weren't CTO of DI, what would you be doing? What would be your ideal job?
Woodworking? No.
Yeah, building houses somewhere in the middle of nowhere.
For nobody?
Yeah, sure. I don't know. I can't sit idle. It's funny, like when when work is slow at home, like I start building tables and cabinets because I need that outlet. And if I don't have that outlet, I seek it out. So
Wow.
if I wasn't doing this, being creative with startups and businesses, I would be finding that elsewhere.
All right. David, what would you be doing? I
What
think
would
I
be
know the
doing?
answer.
I'd be playing music somewhere.
Right.
I'd move to Nashville. Yeah.
Yeah. Tyler, you'd be painting. Like I said, I have no creative talents, so I don't know what I'd be doing. Well, this was really fun. Thank you, guys. We're headed to the Texas State Fair after this, but this has been great.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks.